Yes.
Okay. So, dear friends, welcome for presentation by Florian Sydow from Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. And this is third talk on Grail topic. And best wishes from Chicago for your solstice experience. And we have also Father's Day, which is probably not coincident because we are slowly moving in the Father's area or segment of the year. So when Spirit of Earth is joining first hierarchy in area of Saturn. So, dear Florian, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, Andre. I want to thank you for sponsoring these online events and welcome everybody who's participating from many parts of the world. That's one of the unique benefits of technology is that we can reach into these wider spheres. We just have to do our inner work to compensate for the exposure to these subnature forces. I'm working with some new technology on my end. I've got a sort of a prompter in front of me with a camera behind it, which I haven't done before. I'm trying to get to where I'm spending less time behind slides. Uh, so I'm just on early part of the learning curve on this. I'll be giving this presentation in uh, at the Honolulu uh, Anthroposophical Society later at 6 p.m. here in Honolulu for members and friends. And I think it's important and will become ever more so to attune ourselves to the cosmic rhythms. And this especially involves the sun rhythm, whether it's the day night cycle or the yearly cycle. So, in this yearly cycle, we're then in the time of the summer solstice, and within a few days, it's St. John's tide. And these, in my view, from my studies with anthroposophy, spiritual science, is that these are gateways into the new sun mysteries. Michael is the countenance of the Christ being. And these are really four aspects of this uh, manifestation of the spiritual dimension of the sun that was referred to as Ahura Mazda by Zarathustra in the Persian epoch. So let me move to the slide here. Can you see the slide, first slide right now or no?
No, it's no slide. Oh, now it's done. Yes, it's good.
Okay. So the time is at hand. I think this is relevant on many levels. In the introductory words, I mentioned that Rudolf Steiner was very much attuned to these cosmic rhythms, and among them are what in the East is referred to as the four yugas, and that according to Steiner's interpretation, the Kali Yuga is a 5,000 year period that lasted from 3101 BC to 1899 AD. And in 1899, Rudolf Steiner gave or wrote an essay on Goethe's fairy tale. He had been given a copy of this at age 21 when he had for some time been attending a technical college, and this, what he called his fatherly friend, gave him this as a gift. And he speaks of how for some time he wasn't able to penetrate it, but that at a certain point the knot sort of untied itself. And this had especially to do with the mystery of gold that is very much a part of the theme of the story. And this was published by Goethe in a publication, Die Hörer, the listeners, which was during the time when the French Revolution was happening, and there were a lot of people who had been displaced and by the war that was raging in Europe at that time. And some of them were pouring into Germany, and these people would gather, and storytelling was one of the means of cultivating community within those circles. So this was sort of the last of several stories that Goethe published in this. And it was really as a kind of counterpart to a letter by Schiller that had to do with the aesthetic impulse in human evolution, where he says that on the one hand, in the realm of logic, we're not really free in the head because it's governed by this universal dimension of logic. And in the instinctual life of the limbs and the will forces, where we're more unconscious, the drives and instincts prevent us from being free. That it was in the middle realm of the feeling, where he referred to the play element, that's where we're free. And so Goethe turned this same theme into his fairy tale, which has this threefold structure and the three kings that appear within it. So this is an image that's showing an important scene where the youth Johannes, as he's called, and Steiner patterned his mystery play, his first one, The Portal of Initiation, very much on the same characters that showed up in this profound fairy tale. And each of the characters appears in that first mystery play. So you can see how much of an impact it had on Rudolf Steiner. And the building of the Goetheanum had very much to do with creating a house for these mystery play, a place, a home for spiritual science and anthroposophy, which was still under the Theosophical Society, which Rudolf Steiner became chairman or the leading personage in Germany and later Switzerland and other surrounding countries. So this is kind of a scene where the youth who's on one side of the river, the lily, the beautiful lily who has three helpers, on the other side. She represents the universal soul element in a way. And there's a river that divides these two. And there's only a few ways of crossing. One is on a little bridge that is there at midday and midnight, that is really the snake. And the snake represents, on the one hand, the Luciferic, but also the arts, beauty, the element of thinking, feeling, willing, become wisdom, beauty, and strength in the personages of these three kings that we hear about in the story. But that temple that the snake at one point enters after having eaten gold, he's able to illuminate that darkness. Gold is the precious metal that's related to the sun and the human heart. Just like gold shines, you can polish it, and it's the sun metal, but it's also related to the human heart. This was a very important theme in alchemy, where silver is related to the moon, gold to the sun. These are the more important heavenly bodies. But there's also then the element of Mars, iron, Mercury, the fluid metal Mercury, which is unique. And in alchemy, Mercury was the messenger, the one who brought these dualities together. He often shown carrying the caduceus. And Steiner gave a picture of the caduceus where one is dark and one is light, representing day and night. And the staff in the middle often has wings at the top or a flame, meaning when we weave together day and night in a higher sense and raise that experience to an ever higher level, like the caduceus expresses, then the staff in the middle, the ego, lights up and gains its wings to ascend into the spiritual world, or the flame of enthusiasm, which is an uplifting force. The ego is related to the element of fire. Fire lives in the blood. Lucifer attacked the astral body, which includes the feeling life that lives in the blood. And the redemption of Lucifer can be developed through the arts, through beauty. And Rudolf Steiner worked with that principle very much. So in this picture, the youth can't resist touching, reaching out and touching the beloved lily, but as a result, he dies, or at least he falls to the ground. And the snake, who is there right away, creates a circle around him, bites his own tail. And this is kind of a symbol of magic in a way. And later, the man with the lamp, who plays an important part, his light only really shines when you bring light. This was a curtain that was used for the mystery dramas. In fact, it's still used to this day. And it represents that scene in the Goethe's fairy tale with the river in between. And you can see a building that resembles the Goetheanum up on the mountain on the left. The man in the boat who occurs in the story, he can only take you from the spiritual world to the physical world, from the left bank to the right bank. To get across from the right bank, the physical world, to the spiritual world, the snake was building that bridge in the midday and midnight. And then there was the shadow of the giant, which is another way, but it's not very reliable. It could be mediumship or other forms of spiritual inspiration that are not always clear and the like. So at a certain point in the story, after the snake sacrifices itself, and there then jewels that appear from the body of the snake, and those are thrown into the river, and they become this great bridge that allows not just a few straggling artists to cross over, but large numbers of people. And that's what the mission of spiritual science was. And the Goetheanum, the first Goetheanum, which is what's depicted there with this rose cross in front of it, Steiner speaks of his own initiatory background having to do with Christian Rosenkreuz and the Master Jesus. And Christian Rosenkreuz, you could say, is very much involved in very much of what Rudolf Steiner did in the arts and this realm of beauty, this redemption of Lucifer. So the Rosicrucians and the Holy Grail, according to Rudolf Steiner, the Gospel of John, the mystery of humanity's higher self, was prepared through the Rosicrucian stream and symbolized by the Holy Grail. The Grail became the vessel safeguarding the reborn divine human essence revealed through Christ. Quote, in the Grail lives the ego, which is united with the eternal and the immortal. The Rosy Cross and the Holy Grail represent the same mystery, the rebirth of the higher human self through Christ. As roses spring from the wood of the Black Cross, so the immortal self arises from the transformation of earthly existence. That's from Rudolf Steiner's Gospel of St. John, given in 1909. Are you seeing the slide right now, Andre?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay. So the last time I kind of ended with this slide, which is one of the 7 Rosicrucian seals, the last of them, and it's referred to as the mystery of the Grail. And here I'm kind of bringing it into connection with Solomon's Temple on the one hand, and the Goetheanum on the other. And it has in the bottom of the seal a kind of clear crystal cube. And that cube is really representative of the 3-dimensional world that we're born into, where we go through our biography between birth and death. But at the beginning, it was just a clear, empty space into which the voice of the Logos spoke. And then out of it emerged the world that we experience within the 3 dimensions over long periods of time. And this is connected with the ex Deo Nascimur, the father-mother aspect of the divinity that works through the highest hierarchy of the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones. And there are the tails of serpents, 2 serpents that touch the surfaces, the outer surfaces of this cube. So in order to bring about this 3-dimensional space, the Luciferic forces were a necessary part of that creation. And the next stage from the father, that mother that leads over to the son and the daughter, is then the middle aspect of the threefold divinity. This is the solar logos, the Christ, who is the 13th, you could say. The father-mother forces work in from the zodiac, from the great circle of stars and the constellations. And the mother-father forces working from the zodiac, they chose the Christos to be the 13th in the midst of those 12s. And Lucifer, in his pride, who is connected with Venus, the planet sphere of Venus, rebelled. And that brought about a battle in heaven where Lucifer was cast down to the earth. And that awakened human intelligence in the head. He was cast by Michael into the human head. So our thinking is to begin with Luciferic. And Lucifer also penetrates our heart forces and brings about selfishness and the like. But through purifying the soul, which is related to this serpent's rising up in the middle of this seal, and then there's kind of a breath, a sublimation of the Luciferic that rises up like a spiral out of the mouths of the serpent. This is kind of the redemptive deed of the Christ. So with this goes in Christo morimur. On Golgotha, Lucifer was redeemed and then became the mediator of the Pentecost event that took place 50 days later. He's living in those flames that rise above the heads of the disciples, which I spoke of last time when it was the Pentecost Sunday. So this in Christo morimur leads to the redemption of Lucifer. That doesn't mean the Luciferic angels that overlight us as individuals, which we have to individually redeem. This is something that was done as an archetypal deed on behalf of humanity that we can draw on and imitate. So there is kind of a world Pentecost waiting for us to participate in, where we raise our intelligence to a higher level. It gains wings, and that's the wings of the Holy Spirit. So above we see that dove ascending, and above it at the top of this seal, we have an inverted chalice. You could say there's the old meditation Steiner gave that said that the gods once spoke to us through the stars, but they are silent now. And they're the beings who are behind the stars. We have to lift the veil of Isis, which her garment is the tapestry of the stars, in order to bear witness to the Isis Sophia mysteries embodied in this Queen of the Night. And this dove that ascends, that is really the Christ leading over to the Holy Spirit. So the Old Testament reflects the age of the Father, the New Testament, the age of the Son. The Pentecost event, it prefigures the age of the Holy Spirit. And so this ascending dove is then equivalent to a human being, in this case, through the Christ, speaking through the Holy Spirit. That is then the Logos descended to the earth And in order for something new to come into human evolution, some being has to first embody it. So that deed of Christ is implanted in the evolutionary development of humanity that we can now individually draw on. So once again, the stars can speak to human beings because we have something then through this micro logos to give back to the gods who are now waiting for us. Human beings and our development, our evolution is the religion of the gods. And a big important event in that experience of the religion of the gods was the mystery of Golgotha, which Steiner characterized as the central event in the entire sevenfold sweep of cosmic human evolution. Without it, without that turning point, we wouldn't be able to co-create the New Jerusalem. And I shared some words that Rudolf Steiner at his last Pentecost time in a conversation with Countess Kaiserling, where she asked about the Grail and its connection to the New Jerusalem. And she asked, is this the same temple, edifice, sacred building, or city? And he said that the Grail castle is where it is now in its becoming. Where it will be in the future when it's fully realized, that's the New Jerusalem. So they're directly related to each other. That's why we can call the Goetheanum a Grail castle. So up on the top right there is a kind of cross-section of Solomon's temple. It has two pillars at the entry called Yachim and Boaz. Those are the legs of the temple. The middle space of the temple has the altar of incense where prayers ascended in incense to the hierarchies that were reflected symbolically in the 7-branch candelabra and in the 12 showbreads. So this was a devotion and reverence to the divinity hidden behind the stars, the moving stars and the fixed stars. And only once a year did the high priest enter the Holy of Holies. That's that little cubicle space. That's the head of the temple. This middle region is the heart and rhythmic system of the temple. But at the time of the mystery of Golgotha, the veil of that Holy of Holies, which was 4-colored, representing earth, air, water, fire, the 4 elements, was torn asunder because earth-shaking event that caused the whole earth to shudder had taken place on Golgotha, where it was the middle of the day and the sky was dark. This was around the same time that Longinus, with his spear, out of compassion to prevent these soldiers from breaking the bones of the Christ Jesus hanging on the cross in the middle, because it wasn't acceptable to have these bodies hanging on the Sabbath. And so he was kind of the protector acting out of intuition and this redemptive deed of the Mars forces represented by the spear that allowed blood and water to flow out of the right side of the Christ being. And you can see what I'm trying to say at the top of the picture. There's a relationship between the salt crystal and the cube. The salt in the threefold alchemy that came from Hermes Trismegistus, who was a leading initiate of the Egyptian people. And we know that Moses, as a child, was placed in a river where a princess found him, and he was taken in, and he was educated and initiated into the Egyptian mysteries and brought them back into the Hebrew culture. So that was impressed into this temple. So salt represented thinking, mercury, feeling, sulfur, the will, the fiery sulfur forces. And Christ in the Sermon on the Mount uttered the words, "Ye are the salt of the earth. Ye are the thinking of the earth." And so we have to redeem Lucifer to accomplish that. So when Rudolf Steiner laid the foundation stone, which was a double dodecahedron, he also was working out of alchemy. So they have four of the, what they call the Platonic solids are related in alchemy to earth, air, water, fire. But the dodecahedron is related to the etheric forces working in the whole cosmos. And the earth stage in the sevenfold field of evolution or sequence of evolution is the fourth stage. The earth is in the fourth stage. But Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy are preparing the fifth stage, this dodecahedral stage, where the etheric will be the lowest member of the human being. And the fact that there's two dodecahedrons fused together has to do with the fact that it's relating microcosm and macrocosm. And it's made out of copper, which is the metal related to Venus and Lucifer. So the redemption of Lucifer is very much involved. And there was 9 steps that were dug in order to bury this stone in the spot where it would act as a foundation stone for the Goetheanum. This was laid in September 20th, 1913. And the following year, the First World War broke out. This, on the right bottom there, you see what was placed in that stone, that foundation stone. So here I'm showing this larger sequence of evolution that begins with the old Saturn, the old sun, the old moon, and then at the very bottom is the fourth stage, that's the Earth. And the next future stage is the Jupiter stage, that's called the New Jerusalem, the Golden City in the Book of Revelation. And then there's the Venus stage, and finally the Vulcan stage. Through the mystery of Golgotha, the Christ gave to humanity these 3 higher members that we will only really unfold on those 3 future stages. And those are referred to in the temple legend as the golden triangle. You have the Manas, which is the Jupiter stage, the New Jerusalem, the purified astral body, that's called spirit self. And then the ennobled and transformed etheric body is called life spirit. It's related to the sun principle. You could say the son and daughter aspect, the Sophian and the Christ aspect. And then the Holy Spirit is Manas, spirit self, that we reconnect. That's cosmic thinking. This life spirit is cosmic feeling. And then there's the Atman. This is spirit man. That's in the future Vulcan stage, the very last stage of the sevenfold sequence. That's where the physical body is transformed. And part of that transformation is for the physical body to become a temple. And so the Christ gave this, but each of these steps in the evolution have a certain mystery connected with them. So there's 3 descending stages you can see, then there's a turning point in the middle, and then there's 3 ascending stages. And in the qualitative relationship to numbers that Steiner and the alchemist, the Platonist, Pythagoras used, the 1 is related to the 7, the 2 to the 6, the 3 to the 5, and the 4 stands in the middle. And so that 4th mystery is the mystery of birth, the descending 3, and death, excarnating, and the ascending 3. So that's the central mystery of the earth. But we're in the 5th stage of the earth, where the 5th mystery comes into play. And that's the mystery of good and evil. And for that reason, there's the 8th sphere. Not all of humanity will be able to follow the Christ impulse up through those future stages. A part of humanity will take a downward turn. And they, in the future, the New Jerusalem, just like we have a satellite that circles around the Earth, the moon, there will be a Jupiter moon, where those who have missed the opportunity that the Christ impulse provides will have to dwell, having missed the opportunity of uniting with the Christ and becoming part of this sun earth. So the task of those who have achieved this, the Manichaean task, will be to help redeem those who are still redeemable. It's very important to enter more deeply into the cycle of the year and its smaller counterpart, the day-night cycle, because these are the rhythms through which the etheric forces that we have to get in touch with to participate in the next higher level. The use of these Tao forces, for example, that I spoke of, that can give birth to the new technology, involve entering more deeply into the life rhythms of the earth. So as I said earlier, there are then 4 gates. This is in relation to the yearly cycle. And there's 4 archangels, according to Steiner's lectures on the 4 archangels, and another one related to the cycle of the seasons that he gave in, I believe it was 1924. So these are gateways to the new sun mysteries that we can participate in. And in the early days of anthroposophy, starting in the period leading over from 1905 to 1906, during that period, Steiner gave a series of something like 20 lectures on the temple legend. These were esoteric lessons, so they weren't available till much later. So many anthroposophists at that time didn't have access, except those who were actual participants. And this had to do with a kind of relationship to Freemasonry that Rudolf Steiner undertook, that was not a full-fledged Freemasonic ritual work, but rather flowed out of Rudolf Steiner's inspirations that he received actually in connection with Goethe's fairy tale. So there's 3 altars there in this temple, one in the east, where Rudolf Steiner would preside as sort of the master of ceremonies. That was the altar of wisdom. There was a second little altar beside it where there was a book open, the Gospel of St. John, the first part. In the beginning was the Word. And then the middle altar in the south was related to beauty, and the one in the west to strength. This is related to thinking, feeling, and willing. And in the north was the entry. You entered between the pillars of Joachim and Boaz, which harkened back to Solomon's temple. In the higher grades, there was a fourth altar in the north related to the sun at midnight. But generally, one came in and between these pillars, and you really see the cycle of the day. You come in relation to the left pillar. The Joachim pillar has to do with the red blood, the inbreathing, incarnating into the day consciousness, passing to the morning altar in the east, then to the midday altar in the south, and finally to the evening altar in the west, and then going back out into your daily life, unless you were participating in this higher degree where the fourth altar. And this exit has to do with the blue blood pillar, which has to do with the out breath. And so this has to do with the night, entering from the night into the day. So the three altars are in the day, but when you pass back out, you are in the night. And in the night, we are living in a separation of the physical etheric, which lies on the bed, and the astral and ego that pass into the astral world and potentially the spiritual world, depending on our soul development. The lower devachan, the higher devachan are stages of evolution. So when you cross the threshold, three soul forces separate. Thinking, feeling, and willing separate. And we have to bring them into harmony on a higher level. And this is what these work with these altars was about. So one of the secrets here has to do with the tree of life, the grail, and the future Tao force. According to Rudolf Steiner, humanity gained freedom through partaking of the tree of knowledge, while direct access to the tree of life was withheld and preserved for the future. The tree of life was kept out of their reach. The higher life-giving forces remained connected with the unfallen Adamic stream and later appeared in the Nathan Jesus, the pure vessel prepared to receive the Christ. Through the mystery of Golgotha, these forces entered Earth evolution in a way and were preserved within the Grail stream. When Steiner spoke of the Tao as a force, poetically symbolized by the image of the Holy Grail, he points toward humanity's future reawakening to these very forces of the tree of life. That hammer at the top left is a hammer that's used in this ritual work. It represents the Tao. When Steiner, a year after the burning of the Goetheanum, inaugurated the Christmas Foundation meeting, which would began with the anniversary of the burning, the 1 year. At the podium, he used such a hammer and struck 3 times. And often one would have to listen. Was it a long, short, long? Was it a long, short, short? Each of these things, these hammer blows meant something different to the participants. But for those who were there at the Christmas Foundation, who had participated in this ritual work, which was stopped in 1914 due to the war, where having secret meetings was not something you wanted to sort of risk. It was suspended for a time. So those people who heard it knew that Rudolf Steiner was doing a mystery deed, a ritual event. So among the Masonic images is that the Christ, the Logos, is seen as the divine architect. And up on the right there, I have a image that's often referred to as the squaring of the circle. That square has the same perimeter measurements as the circumference of that circle. And that triangle that cuts through the earth that's in that square reaches in its apex to the center of the moon. So the moon, in proportion to the earth, is related to this squaring of the circle. The Giza pyramid used this geometry, so it was known in Egyptian times. And in Egyptian times, the pyramid, the chief cornerstone, was rejected by the builders, which was an old saying, because only the master builder understood what that chief cornerstone meant, because it was in one piece what the whole pyramid was in many pieces. And it would only be laid as the very last capstone at the very top of the pyramid, and it was then covered with gold. And when the sun rose, that was the first part of the pyramid that was touched and shown to those who looked up to it. And the pyramid was really an initiation. The Giza pyramid was an archetype of an initiation chamber in those Egyptian times. The Holy Grail and the higher self. Following the mystery of Golgotha, the transformed sheaths of Christ, filled ego of Jesus of Nazareth, were multiplied and preserved for humanity's future evolution. Countless copies of his ego were multiplied and preserved for humanity's future evolution. Countless copies of this ego were preserved for posterity. That's Rudolf Steiner. To safeguard this mystery, quote, a brotherhood of initiates was formed, the brotherhood of the Holy Grail, unquote. Later carried forward through the Rosicrucian stream, this mystery points to humanity's eternal spiritual archetype. The Grail, the Rosy Cross, and the higher self reveal one continuous stream, preparing humanity's reunion with the tree of life. Our higher self waits for us in the spiritual world. So that this is something that we as human beings are going to need at the end of the sixth age, when we will have to leave the physical body in order to ascend into a higher stage of development and forge the path to the next great epoch, where there will be a division of humanity into two, you can't really call them races in the modern sense, but there will be an ugly and a beautiful stream of humanity, one fallen, the other lifted up and raised. And they will have the name of the name of the New Jerusalem written on their forehead, which is spoken of and written in the sixth letter in the book of Revelation, the letter to the Church of Philadelphia, which relates to that sixth age, where the Slavic Russian people have a special role and anthroposophy has a special preparatory task. So the understanding that Steiner gave in this picture of he gives it in the Luke Gospel, I believe it's chapter or lecture 7. He speaks of the fall of humanity, the Adam and Eve, after having eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, having to leave the garden. And this has to do with Lucifer, the serpent, tempting the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So he enters the astral body, and there's a danger that he would also infect the etheric body. So the hierarchies, as agents of the divinity, held back a part of the Adam soul. In esotericism, it's called the sister soul of Adam. This is the being who plays an important role in human evolution, but only fully incarnates as the Nathan Jesus at the baptism in the Jordan. I have behind me a picture that I'll try to switch to at some point here. That was a gift from a close friend that has to do with the baptism in the Jordan. So here we hear about the reverse ritual, the community of the cultists. This could be the ritual of the Christian community, seeks to draw the angels of heaven down to the place where the cultist is being celebrated. In contrast, the anthroposophical community seeks to lift human souls into supersensible realms so that they may enter the company of angels. In both cases, that is what creates community. The Grail path leads not merely to individual enlightenment, but to the formation of a new spiritual community united through freedom, love, and conscious participation in the supersensible world. So there's a picture on the left there of Parzival holding up the Grail. This is a meditation I've kind of elaborated a little bit here, given to Ita Wegman by Rudolf Steiner, where you have Christian Rosenkreuz in a blue stola, Rudolf Steiner in a red stola, representing those two pillars. And you can see at the bottom an arrow pointing to the right, looking at it from the perspective of the persons who are standing on either side of that rose cross. And there's a meditation that Steiner gave with it. And that arrow could suggest that in the astral world, everything is reversed. So usually the red pillar would be on the left and the blue on the right as you enter in. So these can be seen as initiates who are the guardians in our time of this threshold into those mysteries that were celebrated on those three altars. And here you get a sense of what these three altars are trying to achieve. So there goes my 1 hour mark. I know it's a little over because we started a little late. So let me see where we can wrap up here. I still have a few things I'd like to share. But in the old Saturn stage, the deepest foundations for the physical body and the will were laid. In the old Sun, it was the etheric body, and the foundation for the feeling life was laid. That's when light entered into human evolution. And in the old Moon, it was the astral body and human thinking. And on the Earth, it's the I. And in the lecture I'm citing here, which is from the Folk Soul lectures, Steiner speaks of, in order to, for the ego development, in order to rise to transforming the planet of wisdom, which is the gift from the old Moon. Everything on the Earth is filled with that wisdom. That's the heritage of the old Moon. But the mission is to fashion, co-create the New Jerusalem, the golden city, the future sun Earth that was planted as a seed through the mystery of
What does
Golgotha.
that mean?
Make it louder. He's talking.
And so you have, when you bring about a balance of thinking, feeling, and willing, then love is born.
So you can only
And
listen up.
we then are able to build this lower triangle that is a base, and the higher triangle then comes to meet it. And out of that union of the threefold divine with the threefold human rising up to unite with it in communion, which the foundation stone meditation that Steiner gave at the Christmas Foundation, he planted in the hearts of human beings. It also has a threefold structure at the beginning, and then a fourth that relates to the mystery of Golgotha. And so in this lecture that I referred to in the introductory words in the invitation, the renewal of the royal art, Steiner speaks of this hexagonal form as the symbol of the Holy Grail. So here I'm trying to show how this arises through a coming together of Cain, which builds the lower triangle in the human sense, and the Abel stream. So the Cain stream, which includes Hiram Abiff, who reincarnated as Christian Rosenkreuz. He's the master of the Tao force, the renewal of the word, the micrologos. Those Cain forces can become like a pyramidic base for an inverted pyramidic chalice that comes to meet it from above through that which is mediated by the Abel stream. So in the mystery of the two Johns that Steiner spoke of as a fragmentary lecture, I only was able to go for like 20 minutes before he had to say he couldn't go on any further. And he was hoping to give the second part. This was on the 28th of September, Michaelmas Eve in 1924. His very last lecture was given at that time, and he never did give the second part on Michaelmas the following day. But he did share with Ito Wegman and his other physician that what he had intended to say was when Lazarus was raised from the dead, the beheaded John the Baptist, who had been in the spiritual world and overlighted the disciples, was drawn into a communion with this beloved disciple, with this Lazarus John, who's the writer, together then with this communion with John the Baptist. They together become the beloved disciple who wrote the Gospel of John, the book of Revelation. And in a conversation with Albert Stephan, Steiner indicated that the first part of the Gospel of John up through the 11th chapter was really the inspiration of this John the Baptist, who had been Elijah, who later appears as the painter Raphael, who gives rise to beauty in his art, this redemption of Lucifer, and finally the wise sage Novalis. These all died young and have a special relationship to the Sophia, the wisdom in the heavens, which has to do with the mystery of water, and the Cain stream with the mystery of fire, and the casting of the brazen sea, which is an important part of the Solomonic temple. The crowning achievement was then communion of these two on a higher level. So Rudolf Steiner was working with these mysteries when he first put these 7 seals in the hall of the Munich Congress between pillars. And Schnappmeyer, a Waldorf teacher who was there, asked him if there was any architectural impulse that these pillars represented. And he then gave him indication that led to this building of the Malschbau, which Rudolf Steiner later said was the first Rosicrucian temple on the earth. Previously, you would have to have met a Rosicrucian initiate or sage, and he would lead you to these 7 imaginations. But now they were brought down to the earth, and they were very much a part of the initial ritual work, which was done in that Moshbao, as well as in this temple, which has the zodiac up above it and featuring very strongly the 4 related to the 4 cardinal directions: the lion, the bull, the eagle, the waterman. And there was always that oculus window that pointed in a certain direction, was meant to sort of let light in the Mauschbau, but in this case it was in a basement. And Rudolf Steiner designed that incense, again with the precious stones that have to do with the same ones that are on the breastplate of the high priest that enter the Holy of Holies. And the 7 pillars have 7 different capitals. And this is sort of an important picture that Steiner gave. And let me just sort of encapsulate it. He says that in the book of Revelation, we hear of the 7 letters, which are given more to the human intelligence raised to a higher level, the 7 seals to imaginative consciousness, the 7 trumpets to inspirational consciousness, the vials to intuitive consciousness, so it ascends to ever higher level. And the trumpets, the last of them, lead over from earth evolution to the New Jerusalem, the Golden City, with a pralaya in between, which is like a cosmic death. And the 2 last trumpets, the 6th and the 7th, are then very important. And Steiner says here he's giving this was during 18 lectures given to the priests. This is the 13th lecture, where he says that he is giving a consciousness soul interpretation in contrast to what he gave in 1908 in Nuremberg on the apocalypse. I think those were 12 lectures. He says he's giving a consciousness soul interpretation, and according to that, since the 1840s, the 6th trumpet has been sounding, and that with it, humanity as a whole has begun to unconsciously cross the threshold, which leads humanity over the abyss. And below in that abyss are the 3 beasts, who are the caricature of thinking, feeling, and willing that divide when you cross the threshold, that one needed to harmonize in that temple at the 3 altars. And he said at the year 2000, the 7th trumpet would be sounding. So that's the period we're in right now. The 7th trumpet is sounding. And the 3 last trumpets are called the 3 woes. So they're very powerful trials that humanity is passing through. And he says in the lower part of this quote here that is in one of the Karma lectures, that when you look into the spiritual world with the eyes of the seer, you can see some human soul ascending and others descending. And the tragedy of it is that not just are we who are hopefully ascending giving something to our angel through this new connection to the spiritual world, those who neglect to raise their consciousness upward, but instead embrace materialism and the Ahrimanic and Luciferic forces that are turned to the eighth sphere, that those souls are actually pulling their angel down with them. So this is part of the tragedy of the times we live in. And in this collective initiation of humanity, which in this picture, which is taken from, it's the fourth seal having to do with the whole earth, the pillar of Jachin and Boaz that occur at Solomon's temple. Later on the water where the pillar on the left is and the dry land in the 13th chapter, you have the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, the astral ocean on the left arises as the Luciferic temptation that would lead us back to the 7 root races at a time when we're meant to evolve this new community beyond race and blood. And on the right, you have the 2-horned beast that arises out of the dry land. So these are the 2 beasts that we have to keep in balance by passing through between the pillars in the middle into the temple. And this angel has a book that's opened, and John is invited to take it up and eat it, and it will taste like honey in the mouth and bitter in the belly. So it's sweet to have this experience of revelation, but when you live it, you have to take up the cross of sharing in the suffering of others around you, which at first Parsival didn't have. That's what purifies the heart and soul. And there are then a division of humanity into the rainbow people, the feeling people of Middle Europe, the will people of the West, and the cloud people of the East, thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, the cloud people, the rainbow people of Middle Europe, and the will people of the Americas, especially at one point he says one can imagine that left pillar on the Pacific Ocean, the right on the Andes Mountains, the cloud people related to the Russian Slavic people, and the rainbow feeling people in Middle Europe. And each of these people have a different gift that comes to expression when we cross the threshold. Eugenic occultism, the birth mysteries to the people of the East, where the Slavic Russian people have a special talent that will be needed in the 6th age to overcome physical incarnation. And then the people in the middle have hygienic occultism, the rainbow people of Middle Europe that Rudolf Steiner sought to cultivate and awaken. And then there is the mechanical occultism of the West. These are the Tao forces that have 2 sides to them, a good and a bad side. So in the red window, you see those 3 beasts on the left. You see the awakened human beings in the middle, and you see the human being who wins a victory on the far right. This was a model for the original Goetheanum, which was meant to be in Munich. The authorities didn't allow it, so it then got transferred to Switzerland, Dornach. And of course, later the war broke out, and in the Second World War, Munich was destroyed. So it was a certain way a godsend. This Grail triptych was meant to go into that Munich building. I'm going to deal with this in a future presentation, so I'll move past it here. But on the left is Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, Hiram, the temple, the Ark of the Covenant, and Hiram holds the hammer, which is these micrologos forces. And that clairvoyance is still living in the blood. Moses is looking back at the burning bush in the left panel at the bottom. That leads up eventually to Abraham Jacob, Isaac, and you have at the top Melchizedek, who was a forerunner of the Grail mysteries. And in the middle, you have Joseph Arimathea capturing the blood, the renewal of the tree of life. And on the right panel, you have the initiation of Christian Rosenkreuz. This has to do with two currents of time. The one on the left is the etheric stream that works through time, and the other works from the future into the present. That's the astral stream we have to get in touch with to anticipate the future prophetically. And the Goetheanum related to Solomon's Temple, I'm trying to show here this fourth seal having to do with the entry to Solomon's Temple, and the Holy of Holies, that cubical space having to do with the salt and thinking, that's embodied in the Goetheanum in a new form. And Rudolf Steiner embodied this mystery of the head that was centered in that cubical space in the Goetheanum, where a cross section reveals a relationship to the human head, the big copula, the cerebrum, the small copula to the cerebellum. Cerebellum, Steiner speaks of with Bodhi tree. Buddha under the Bodhi tree can be likened to the cerebellum, which can grow into a tree. And the place where he sits is the pineal gland. Pineal is closely related to the pituitary, two organs that are really the head of the caduceus serpent that rises up with the kundalini to the head and brings about enlightenment. So Rudolf Steiner spoke from the place in that cross-section related to the human head, where the pineal gland would be located. And here he said, a man must develop certain organs for his higher development. To this end, certain concentrations are done in yoga exercises. When a man concentrates on a point between the eyes at the root of the nose with the thought, I am, he develops the organs that we call the two-petal lotus flower, and that makes firm into an eye, makes him into an eye. But it isn't enough that the organ of the ego is developed in man, so that the higher self can stream into him to make him into a higher being. We find the organ for this where a vertical line from the top of the head crosses a horizontal line through the root of the nose or a little above it. This organ is the pineal gland. Man makes a connection with the divine self in the world through the pineal gland, which is located in the middle of the head. This is the Grail organ within the head. So the Goetheanum has this healing impulse leading to the back of the stage, where the image of the Christ was the most important imagination brought down between Lucifer and Ahriman, this new threefold understanding of good and evil that is needed in our time. And this layout of the Goetheanum has within it this Tau cross. The Ankh of the Egyptian is the same as what's the Tau, and the Rose Cross is saying the same thing. Steiner speaks of the dewdrop as well. In the Atlantean time, the world of tone, the music of the sphere, still resonated in the fluid element. And this Tau cross was found in Ireland, where the Atlantean mysteries were brought onto the beginning of Europe. Ireland is a very significant place that reflects a sort of the untouched sort of part of the earth by Lucifer. It has a reflection of the paradisical. And that circle that you saw on that Tau cross, it circles 12 altars, 2 sets of 6 altars on either side of that stage. These are seats reserved for the 12 bodhisattvas. There are 6 pre-Christian bodhisattvas, culminating in Gautama Buddha, 600 years before Christ. And now we have the new Maitreya Bodhisattva incarnating regularly until he achieves Buddhahood in the 6th age. He will be the first to bring these Grail sword, these micro-logos into his speech to awaken people with the moral force of the Tao. And the Christ is the 13th. So between the incarnations of the Bodhisattvas, they sit around the 13th and absorb his radiance, the sun radiance of the Christ. And each of them bring a different virtue of the Christ being. Gautama, it was the teaching of compassion, but Christ embodied it in a deed. So here, the Holy Grail, the Tao, and the future, the force common to all humanity is called Buddhi. Today, the intellect predominates. In the future, it will be love. This force is symbolized by the sign of the Tao and was poetically symbolized in the image of the Holy Grail. The Grail points towards a future stage of human evolution in which wisdom, freedom, love, and technology are consciously united. The mechanical and the moral must interpenetrate each other, according to Steiner. What is expressed by the Tao is a driving force which can only be set in motion by the power of selfless love. And what this means is selfless love is the means of uniting with the Nathan Jesus, who is the Grail vessel that received the Christ and was transmuted through those 3 1/3 years leading up to the mystery of Golgotha. And copies of that being are waiting for us to reach that stage of selflessness. And we will need it at the end of the 6th age to participate in this new development where the etheric will be the lowest member and will live in the atmosphere of the earth as opposed to physical incarnation. So I wanted to just say John Worrell Keeley, Blavatsky wrote about him. Steiner spoke of him as a forerunner. This Clara Bloomfield Moore was his advocate and helped to fund some of his research. He created a company. The problem was that the machines he created could only work when he was present because he had this etheric force. Now, what the Nathan Jesus embodies is the life ether and the chemical ether, which were held back. A part of those was held back. And those are needed for this future moral technology. And Paul Emberson suggests that Christian Rosenkreutz was instrumental in helping Keeley to achieve this capacity. There's another man, Victor Schauberger, who also worked with the etheric forces and new technology. We don't have time to get into his work. Another is Paul Emberson, who I just mentioned. He's written 3 volumes titled From Jundi Shapur to Silicon Valley. Each of them is about 400 pages. The last one, the 3rd volume, was posthumously published, started an organization called Anthrotech. And this was a model of one of the structures that they built, has 3 different axes. And this flow form impulse arose out of this impulse of enlivening water. Water is the main medium of the etheric. It's there in our food to enhance the etheric in the food, enlivening the water. These lemniscatory motions, that's sort of a symbol of magic. These vortexes draw etheric forces in. And there's several people who worked with water, and John Wilkes among them. He was the one who invented these flow forms, and it really came to him when he was working on the model of the Christ sculpture that Rudolf Steiner had worked on. And of course, these other individuals that mentioned there, Verdansky, Theodor Schwenk, and Victor Schauber, they all work with water. So water is related to ice when it condenses, cold, but it also then evaporates into the clouds. So it has this levity gravity. Behold, he cometh in the clouds, and every eye shall see him. This is one of the mysteries of the second coming. So water is within the human organism, the fluid element is the bearer of the etheric forces, especially. So here is trying to give this picture of he cometh in the clouds, every eye will see him. This is the second coming in the etheric. Steiner spoke of how that would begin in the 1930s. 1933 was especially important. But in the priest cycle, he shared the words that before the human beings can encounter the Christ in the etheric, they must meet the beast that rise in 1933. And that manifested in Hitler, if one looks back. Steiner said this in 1924, among the last of his lectures. So the Christ impulse in the etheric, which looks into the future, as opposed to the mystery of Golgotha in the past. It'll be especially important with the next 2,500 years since the beginning of the Age of Light in 1900, this new golden age of light. The time is at hand. It's unfolding in our time in the etheric, living into the life rhythms, living into this world of earth, air, water, fire, the four elements behind which are these elemental beings that you hear about in fairy tales. We have to lift the veil, and the plant world can help us to do that. I have a little garden outside, and learning about the birds and the bees, flowers and the trees is all part of lifting the veil of Maya and illusion. And projective geometry is a geometry that deals with counter space. It's a worthy study that Rudolf Steiner's students, several of them, took up. So the Grail chalice, it was received by Titurel. According to Steiner, this was really the same being who had, as the Master Jesus, who appears as the Solomon Jesus, harkens back to Zarathustra, who prophetically anticipated Christ in our Ahura Mazda. This cup was in Valencia, Spain. I believe that was where in the Pyrenees, this Grail castle was meant to be brought down, and Titurel was sort of the inspirer of these Grail mysteries that were carried from the East to Middle Europe. And so all of us have been crossing this threshold according to that fourth seal, where these three types of occultism come to expression. But this is the image that belongs to the seventh trumpet. And this is really an image of the Grail metamorphosed from the Pietà image that Parzival meets, and that's there beneath the cross on Golgotha with the Maria Sophia holding the body that was then laid into the earth, that transforms the bread, the earth, into the seed for the future golden city, the New Jerusalem. But this is now the second coming. This image harkens back to Atlantean times, to the end of the earth, but it's very much present in our time. And the dragon with the 7 heads seeks to devour the child, our own higher self. We have to awaken to the mysteries of the night. The new Isis Sophia, she is the queen of the night. Steiner, in his 4 lectures on the Isis Sophia mysteries, mentioned that we have the Christ. What we're missing is the Sophia of Christ, the wisdom of Christ. And we have to take in that wisdom. And as we do, this wisdom can grow into love within the human heart. And the heart can begin to shine. And this is an expression of the Grail mysteries. So here is an image of where the Goetheanum becomes a metamorphosis of Goethe's fairy tale, where many people are able to enter this temple that has risen from the subterranean depths to the heights through the sacrifice of the snake, through the marriage of the lily and the youth that's celebrated in Goethe's fairy tale. Rudolf Steiner indicated that there was a Michael school in the spiritual world in the sun sphere from the 15th century to the beginning of the tail end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century. He says it went from spiritual teaching of the old and new mysteries to a ritual event, a ritual celebration in the heavens. And he says that Goethe received a miniature copy of those imaginations, and this was distilled into Goethe's fairy tale, which Steiner says became the germinal seed out of which anthroposophy was born. In another place, he says that the Templars, who had been martyred and burned at the stake, mediated these imaginations to Goethe. So let me end with that. Obviously, you've gone on at least another half hour longer than intended.
Well, dear Florian, thank you so much for your intense, as usual, presentation. So, will we able to ask questions?
Yeah.
So, fresh enough for it?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to where, can you see me now, or you still see the images?
We seeing some image which is not quite related to the presentation.
Yeah, that's the Grail
Previous, okay.
ritual.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can.
Mhm. Mm. You would like to see your face.
We have his face.
Yeah, here's his face.
Can you see me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
All right, dear friends, any questions to Florian?
Andre, have you seen that there is someone in the chat? Daniel?
Yeah, looks like Daniel left. Or
Okay.
she probably. For some reason, she left the meeting.
I would have a question. You mentioned the first time you spoke about the Tao. it went very quickly. You mean it's the kind of, or that's what I understood, is the kind of connection between the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, which was withheld to us, correct?
Yes, the Tao force has especially to do with the tree of life that's represented by the tone ether and life ether. Those are the ethers that reach more down into the physical, and they're more connected with the masculine gender. The feminine gender is more connected with the light ether and the warmth ether. And each of these have their double, like Lucifer works more through the light and warmth ether and can therefore more readily influence the feminine. The masculine, the Ahriman forces can more readily influence the tone ether and the life ether, which have to do with relationship to the elements of the fluid and the mineral realm. And so whenever you deal with technology, like in the mystery drama, you have to wrestle with Ahriman, who dominates the sphere of technology, because in it are the death forces. But you're correct that the higher aspect of the chemical or tone ether related to the music of the spheres and the life ether were held back in the Mother Lodge. And this cherubim with the fiery sword guards the threshold to that tree of life. But the Nathan Jesus being, who embodies those tree of life forces, those higher ethers, descended through the Nathan Jesus and became the vessel for the Christ being. And that's a renewal of those forces. And this transformed vessel was multiplied and is waiting for us in our future destiny to receive as the Grail.
Thank you. So Ted.
Hello. Thank you. Mr. Sydow, thank you so much. Your lectures are really wonderful. I heard you say something about Lucifer and thinking, and I have not seen all of your series, but I'm curious whether you could help us with the challenge of Ahriman and how we could meet that challenge and explain that a little bit, because I get a good picture of Lucifer's challenge, but I think also because of the times, Ahriman seems to be in our myth, and I'm wondering whether you could help us with that.
Yeah, so the mystery of evil is in the foreground in our fifth age. And that's one of the main reasons that out of the imaginations that were there in the small cupola of the Goetheanum, the central one is the one where the Jesus Christ being appears between Lucifer up above and Ahriman down below. That's what he chose to bring down. That's the only main piece of the first Goetheanum that wasn't destroyed by fire. But it was meant to be, according to Steiner's indication, be placed in the second Goetheanum in the same location, but instead it was put into a side room where you can go and meditate on it. And the picture that I would share with regards to this Lucifer and Ahriman in the human organism, the old Christian initiation involved the washing, the scourging, the crowning of thorns, the cross bearing, the crucifixion, the entombment, the ascension, resurrection, etc. And the first one, the washing of the feet, Steiner describes that as this picture of the Jesus Christ being. This was in connection with the Last Supper time. He was then washing the feet. This is then the master being like a servant. And when it came to Peter, Peter saw it as kind of a condescension, and he said he didn't really want him to wash his feet, and he said, if I don't wash your feet, you'll have no part in me. And he said, well, then wash my whole body. And he said, no, I only have to wash your feet. This is the protection, according to Steiner, against the Ahrimanic forces that come from the interior of the earth, especially. They have in the Rosicrucian, you have 9 layers of the interior of the earth, and Ahriman is especially at home in the 6th layer, which is where volcanism comes from. And that's related to our lower astral forces. The fire forces in the interior of the earth are the hell regions of the earth. And so we're being, through that Christian initiation, protected, at least the disciples were, through that. And Steiner points out that Ahriman arises through the feet. And if we don't have the Christ in the human heart, then whatever is left of the Luciferic influence in the head, Ahriman can take hold of it and pull it down to serve the lower nature. So in this way, human beings can become possessed by Ahriman, and each of us have Ahrimanic Luciferic doppelganger. Feminine more the Luciferic, the male double is more the Ahrimanic. The Ahrimanic doppelganger, which Steiner speaks of in the Occult Geography 2 lectures, as well as others on this work of the secret societies, that the Ahrimanic forces especially work where the north-south mountain ranges are. And in Asia, the dominant mountain ranges are east-west. In the Americas, on the west coast, all the way from Canada down through the Rockies in the United States and into South America, you have the north-south mountain ranges, and they are running in the direction of the Earth's magnetosphere. So Lucifer, with the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, infected that astral body of the human being. And so the light ether, which is related to our thinking, it's like a picture that Steiner gives is that in the battle in heaven I spoke of earlier, when Lucifer rebelled, Lucifer, whose home was one time Venus. Venus is often called the planet of love. Cast down to the earth. He was cast down, according to Steiner, into human heads. That awakened human intelligence. But Ahriman, he says, comes from below in our time, since the 1840s especially. And that's when there was another battle between 1840, it began and culminated in 1879 with Michael casting down these spirits of darkness, these Ahrimanic angels, who then find their way into the human world. And that 1879 is the beginning of the Michael age. So that sets the stage for the dawning of the new age of light in 1900. And Rudolf Steiner was very much attuned to this 1879 Michaelic age and the being of Michael in general. And this picture of Ahriman coming through the feet. He uses the doppelganger lives in the bioelectromagnetic forces in our organism. This is a being who is evolving to become what the human being is now in the future Jupiter condition. And Steiner, in a particular lecture, speaks of how during the old moon evolution, the angels were going through their human stage, and we were equivalent to what the double is now. And in the second half of the old moon evolution, we human beings and that old moon stage had a disturbing effect on the development of the angels. And some of those angels remained behind as Luciferic angels, others progressed to become true angels in this earth sphere. The Ahrimanic beings remained behind on the old sun, the 2 stages ago, and they're connected with magnetism. So those north-south mountain ranges in the US, that's where Silicon Valley is, that's where Hollywood is, that's where Bill Gates, with his empire of helping to start this revolution that leads to the computers, internet, artificial intelligence, transhumanism. These are all inspirations that are now being embraced by Silicon Valley elites. So Steiner says that while this Michael school was taking place in the spiritual world, Ahriman created a counter school in the earth's depths. And so just like there's souls that came from that Michael school down and became anthroposophists on the earth, there are people, souls who attended this Ahrimanic school who are the leading figures in this techno development that is very much Ahrimanic, that the Tao force needs to redeem and renew on a higher level so that technology can become moral technology. So the battle with Ahriman will get ever stronger because the first half of evolution, the feminine birth mysteries are in the foreground. The second half, which began in the middle of the Atlantean, are when Ahriman starts to come into play, and the earth is in its dying phase. That's why we will have to become looser connected with the earth. There's an excarnation process that's underway, and Ahriman wants to capture human being together with Lucifer and lead them into the 8th sphere, which is a planetary sphere beyond the 7-fold rightful stages, that is kind of a counter Earth. And so that's a long answer to your question.
Could I just ask one little follow-up? Since he
Sure.
attacks the feet, does that mean he's attacking the limbs and the will forces?
Yes, through the will. The will is expressed in technology. So that's related to the 3rd altar in the West, the altar of strength. That's what we have to take with us out of that temple lodge with the 3 altars. We have to take that wisdom, beauty, and imbue it with strength and take it back with us into the time when we're sleeping, and then bring it back the next day on a new level, hopefully, in the morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
All right, Yaya is next.
Yes, thank you so much, Florian. At one point you mentioned that you wanted to show us the painting that is behind you. Can you show it to us now and tell us about it, please?
Yeah, it was a gift from Virginia Brett. She was at one time living in Dornach as a speech teacher. She was also a eurythmist and a curative eurythmist. But in her later life, she focused more on speech. She had a house within a stone's throw from the Goetheanum, very beautiful building where she invited artists to stay. who are visiting Dornach. She came to Kahumana, which is a community I was involved with here on Oahu. And she brought some of her things with her, including this painting, which was painted by Gerhard Wagner. And it's related to the baptism in the Jordan. So I thought it's kind of fitting since on the 24th we have St. John's Day, and the Grail is very much, there's a relationship between the individuality of John the Baptist and the Nathan Jesus being. You might recall how in the biblical story, Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant when she meets her cousin Mary, and the baby in Elizabeth's womb leaps. That's the Nathan Jesus entering into John the Baptist, having that awakening effect. They have an affinity with each other. This John the Baptist has kind of this Adamic soul, this Adam soul quality. So anyways, it's maybe a little hard to see the top of the picture. I'll see if I can raise that up a little bit. It's got the mystery of Golgotha above with the rainbow and the three crosses. And so anyways, I inherited many of her books, as well as she had, we created a special speech room for her. I was the architect, and she taught me how to speak the opening words to St. John's Gospel, for example. And when it came to where she was reaching a point where she felt her time was coming, she moved down to the end of our house because she couldn't climb the stairs anymore. And on the end of our house, on the west end, there were two rooms with a middle room, and she put the sign of Alpha on the one door on the right and Omega on the other door. She would sleep in the Omega room. She would spend her days in the Alpha room where she had a little library and things. And then when she saw her time coming, she moved into the Alpha room, invited a few friends. Said goodbye. I was among them, said goodbye, and she passed across the threshold in the most beautiful, well-prepared way. So forgive me for becoming emotional, but I feel she's one of the people in the spiritual world that I'm close to.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Very welcome.
And thank you, Yaya, that you asked that.
Yeah, that was the beginning of the 3 years. That was the event where the Christ entered the sheath of the Jesus being, which, as those of you know, involved actually two beings. The Nathan Jesus was the bodily vessel. The Solomon Jesus had entered at the age of 12. So it was a communion of two beings, one who had a very high biography of Zarathustra behind him, who prophetically anticipated the Christ, the other who had never incarnated before, who overlighted as Krishna in the Hindu mysteries, but hadn't yet fully come down. He was serving as the mediator of 3 interventions of Christ, once in the Lemurian time, according to Steiner, twice in the Atlantean time, and for the 4th time at this turning point of time. He was seen as the phoenix in the pre-Christian mysteries that were celebrated in Phoenicia, where Hiram Abiff came from, and the Queen of Sheba also came from the Sabaean mysteries, where this phoenix being, the Nathan Jesus, was celebrated in a pre-Christian Grail sense. And she, in that Grail triptych, carries that pre-Christian Grail between Solomon and Hiram. And she, the Queen of Sheba, in my view, reappeared as the Solomon Mary. Solomon Mary is the one who is in the midst of the disciples at the Pentecost event, and the Nathan Mary united with her inwardly, and the Sophia united with the 2 of them. So you have the Maria Sophia as the center of the Pentecost event. And the second coming is Christ coming through the Holy Spirit, through divine thinking. So that's where the redemption of Lucifer plays a big role. And we need that fire of enthusiasm and the purification that the arts can give, that raise it to beauty that's compatible with truth and strength, wisdom and strength.
Yeah, thank you. Florian, I have a question. So it relates to Tao and how the sign of Tao and how it relates to one of the greatest spirits of Atlantis, the Tao. And I believe it's later appears in China because they inherited Atlantic wisdom and tradition. But also it relates to American mysteries, mystery of Taotl. Do we have any kind of bridges between those 2 or 3?
Yeah, I mean, the Atlantean period had 7 oracles related to the 7 planetary spheres, as they were seen as archetypes of the 7-fold evolution. And the central of those mysteries was the sun mysteries. They were guarded by the Manu. In the Old Testament, this is the being who's called Noah, who carries those sun mysteries over into the post-Atlantean after the flood, where the rainbow appears for the first time, as Atlantis was still covered in mist. And that misty air was filled with the resonance of the Tao forces, which human beings could still hear. For them, the divinity lived in the word of the Tao, which spoke to them through this realm of inspiration. Human beings still had a vestigial clairvoyance. The clairvoyance, just when you ascend, goes from imagination, first seeing into the elemental world, then the angelic world, through the astral imaginative pictures, but then it gets into the lower Devachan and higher Devachan. Lower Devachan is below the sun. The sun is the gateway to higher Devachan. The moon is the gateway to the astral world. And these are connected, as I said, with silver and gold. The sun and the moon are really the Grail theme that was already there in the sun mysteries in Atlantis. And the Tao mysteries, to make a long story short, in the 5th Atlantean period, the Manu led the most advanced human beings who had begun to develop human intelligence via Ireland. There was migration to Central Asia, the Gobi Desert region on the one hand, which is where the post-Atlantean future ages were inaugurated. He sent out the 7 holy rishis, which were related to the beings who had inspired the 7 oracles of Atlantis. And they then helped to inaugurate the ancient Indian period. But they left behind some people who stayed in the northern part of Europe, in Ireland, later became the Celtic mysteries, and these Tao forces played a role there. And these are the forces that can work right down into the physical. These are magical forces. So Cain was born before the fall. He still has the sunbirth, the magical androgynous forces before the fall. But then he got drawn into the fall after Cain killing Abel because his offering wasn't received by Yahweh, was rejected. And that helped to instill this reaction of anger that Cain killing Abel, Abel being epitomizing these will forces that can work down into the mineral kingdom, but they have the danger of the darker fire forces. And in the latter part of the Atlantean period, there was a betrayal of the sun mysteries, these Tao forces, and the backward magical forces started to play a role. And that was then very much a reason why Zarathustra created this polarity between Ormuzd or Huamazdal and Ahriman, because those dark, misused magical forces were carried into those regions where now you have the war going on in Iran. And that's where Gundi Shapur, for example, was propagated, which was the anti-Christian work of the sun demon. So the sun demon works with these anti-Grail forces. He's the cosmic antichrist, whose number is 666. But from the Atlantean period, there were not just migrations that went westward, but also those that went eastward. And Steiner speaks of sort of a kind of caricature of the Manu sun worship, the Tao in China. You had both positive in the Tao of Lao Tse and the like, where they were preserving the old. Steiner speaks of how the ripe fruit of the Atlantean period was the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th were overripe. This includes the Chinese, the Mongolian people. And the Mongolians have these magical forces. They were also including Mars forces that then came to Europe in the Mongol invasions. They were sent by a priest who had been initiated into the sort of descendants of the Tao sun mysteries that had taken on some of the shadow of Luciferic forces. And those then, Genghis Khan and other followers, waves of these Mongolian invasions devastated Europe, and they worked through the backward moon forces in a certain respect. And in America, those forces, as Steiner says, were meant to lead into a Luciferic direction. But the other migrations that went to the Americas gave birth to the Mexican mysteries, which were an Ahrimanic caricature of the sun mysteries. And they were sort of, you could say, inspired by the anti-sun mysteries. And they then resorted to human sacrifice, black magic. And Steiner speaks of a great battle by a sun initiate that corresponded to the turning point of time where this sun initiate was able to crucify this black magician who had reached great height. These black magicians seek to penetrate the interior of the earth. They seek the center of the earth, which is where the Christ descended to do battle with these forces to make possible the future New Jerusalem. So there's a battle that, in my view, corresponds to what the pineal gland is in our heads, to the earth as a macrocosmic head. There's a golden center at the center of the earth, but it's a place where there's a battle for the future of the earth that we all can participate in through the 4 great seasonal festivals, just like we can participate in the day-night rhythm through those 4 altars that were there in that temple that Steiner worked with in this Freemasonic ritual work. So you have these Mexican mysteries were banished for a time, but Steiner indicated that they would come back in these forces that wanted to mechanize everything. And so you could say these Ahrimanic forces carried in the magnetic field of the earth, which is a fallen tone ether. Electricity is fallen light ether, it's decaying light. And these forces seek the interior of the earth. Magnetism is generated at the core of the earth. Electricity is captured by magnetism. Lucifer is related to electricity, decaying light, fallen light ether. Ahriman is fallen tone ether. So to do this higher technology, we have to redeem these. We have to know that the metals that you use are related to the planetary spheres. We have to develop a new alchemy that was very much a part of the Rosicrucian mysteries. And Christian Rosenkreutz's ether body plays a big role in these new Tao mysteries. Steiner indicated that this ether body would grow stronger and stronger to where it wasn't just available to his pupils, but would be available to larger parts of humanity in relation to the second coming in the etheric. So he is the one who is the guardian of the new Tao mysteries, Christian Rosenkreutz, who was Hiram Abiff. And so this is just a sort of a picture of that hammer, or also the Ankh of the Egyptians. The Grail mysteries are a renewal of the Egyptian mysteries. The Arthurian mysteries were harken back to the sentient soul, where you have the cosmic dimension of Christ, the 12 knights, Arthur representing the sun, Guinevere the moon, and you have the 12 knights related to the 12 zodiac, and the other knights, the other stars. And then the repetition of the intellectual soul, which is when the Christ event took place, emerges imaginatively, symbolically in the Grail and everything having to do with it. And that's where the soul becomes divided between the wounded Amfortas on the one hand and Parzival on the other. It's the etheric body that's involved in the intellectual soul, just like the astral in the sentient soul. But now we're in the consciousness soul, and Parzival is the forerunner of the consciousness soul. So when you hear of these three, the Arthurian Knights, the Grail, Amfortas, and Parsifal, you're dealing with sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul, converging and renewing in our post-Atlantean fifth age on a new level.
Yeah, thank you so much. So originally Tao, this is sign or being of which is relates to Sun oracle in Atlantis, right?
Yeah, the magical forces that related to the wielding of the tone and the life ethers. They can work right down behind the elemental table of chemistry. You can discern a kind of sevenfold, just like in music, sequence. And that behind that elemental table is the tone ether. So if you look at the table of the elements and you see the lightest elements like hydrogen, that's like the high notes. And then you've got uranium, which is the heaviest element. You got the dark notes. And we've been pounding on those dark notes with the development of purifying uranium. That's what the big battle is right now in Iran. Developing its nuclear, and America, which has the most nuclear, together with China and Russia, they are dictating who can have and who can't have. And so these people, the more you say the forbidden fruit, the more they want it, because that's what gives power. The Israelis have nuclear weapons. And so the nuclear force is the backward Saturn forces. That's why nuclear and decay leads to lead, which is a signature of Saturn, just like gold of the sun and silver of the moon.
Yeah. Florian, for some reason, we see one of your slides instead of your face.
Okay.
Can you, okay, excellent. All right, dear friends. So shall we conclude and say thank you to Florian, and we will expect next. So next is will be number 4, right? Out of 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Florian, it's again slide instead of your face. Okay, great. All right, dear Florian, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you,
You're more than
Florian.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you
Dear
all.
friends, it will be it's recorded. It will be posted on Threefold Mankind YouTube channel. So it's specifically for Mary. Mary, did you hear, right? Okay, excellent. All right, so okay, thank you.
And thank you, Andre, for organizing this.
Well, I mean, it's
Thank you, Andre.
not so much of labor, it's just joy.
Could you please repeat where will be the link posted for the recording?
Threefold Mankind, or you can just, send email to me. I will just. If you have do you have announcement? Did you receive an announcement? One of
Yes.
in the signature, it's past lectures recording.
Okay.
Click
All
on.
right. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Wonderful.
Friends.
That was a wonderful lecture. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very
goodbye,
much.
everybody.
Thank you, Florian.
Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.